Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. And on this episode, I will be sitting down to do a podcast with my friend Neo. Even though I met Neo on this particular day, he was able to open up and tell me his life story and as well as the crazy things that's been going on in his life for the past 3 months. Neo is an industrial engineer graduate from Texas A&M. He is one of the most intellectual and sophisticated person that I've been able to meet and as well as do a podcast with. So the podcast will begin with Neo telling me about some of the creative things that he's done at Texas A&M and his invention. It will follow into how he got a career with Oracle, where he was doing tech, bringing genius ideas to the company, which they weren't ready to accept. So they end up letting him go, and he will go to a music festival called Freaky Deaky here in Houston, Texas, where he would then consume a large portion of shrooms, which then gave him a brand new insight on life and changed the way he looked at everything. He then later down the line ends up going to a spa where they have a nude section where you can go into the water fully nude. They also have a women's side and a man's side. He then, throughout the time, transcends sexuality and goes into the women's side because he felt like he needed to go there to kill his ego. And once he goes into the water, the women were going crazy saying, hey, you don't belong here. You're not supposed to be here. But at the snap of a finger, they all removed their hands off of him and just stayed silent. He then goes on to tell me that he ended up in a jail cell, which then he was freed by the grace of God. This story is one of the most craziest stories that I've ever heard. And aside from his story, I was also able to open up about some of my personal things and some losses that I faced in the past couple months. So I guarantee you, if you stay tuned for this entire episode, it will be one of the most amazing podcasts that you've ever heard, and as well as the most informative podcast that you've ever seen. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer. We use minor profanity in this video, and we do face some technical difficulties while shooting this video. Towards the center of the video, maybe an hour in, we'll lose video footage. So I replaced it with a footage of a car driving down a city. And this video will then turn into a car ride where you're listening to us speak. And that is when we get really juicy and start speaking about some of the most interesting things that I mentioned at the beginning. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And thank you so much, Neo, for being able to open up and tell me your story, even though we just met. With that being said, let's get right into the video.
I have something to share about what's gone on in the last couple of months, actually. And it's an important message. It's something like personal, though. And it's like kind of crazy that I'm about to drop this on someone that I just met today. But at the same time, like, yeah, we met a few hours ago, but like, what is time?
True.
Like,
Time is just an illusion, a thought that an idea that we've been taught to accept and use as, I guess, accounting.
we live, by the way?
But yeah, time, I don't know. When I think about time, man, it's a crazy concept and it's hard to grasp, bro. A lot of books have been written about time, but still something very hard to grasp.
Yeah.
But like you said, I'm sure you're going to uncover some personal shit. I'll probably do the same thing. You know, this is just us meeting.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
sharing our story. I believe in life story for life story. And I'm very transparent when I speak to people, whether I just meet them now or they're good friends of mine. But so your name, I guess, you know, we can start off with that.
Yeah, so at birth, I was named Neil Patel. Over the years, I changed my last name to include not only my dad's last name, but my mom's too. Because like I said, my dad's from India, but my mom's from Colombia. And so, you know, and there's also like 1.5 million Neil Patels. So like early on, I would see these signs on the internet saying like, who is Neil Patel? And I realized that there's a genius bald Neil Patel somewhere in the world who's like a master at SEO and search engine optimization. And he's like the paid ads guy. He owns Neil Patel Digital.
Wow.
But people would send me this like, who is Neil Patel? A beautiful woman holding a sign named who is Neil Patel, or like the words on the mirror. I was just like, that's kind of absurd. Cool. Let me hyphenate. And so I added my mom's last name, which is Hernandez. So it's Neil Patel Hernandez now, but I go by the pseudonym Neo. It's Neo. It's a little, save a couple letters and just, you know.
Simplify it.
And it's interesting because that, obviously it's like a matrix. I remember when I first changed it to that, people were like, wait, so you actually think we're in a matrix? And they would like talk all this shit. And I was like, maybe, like, who knows, right? And,
Yeah. You never know. I mean, we could so much be, even though it's an idea, but
someone came up with that idea.
you never know, bro.
That
I mean,
inspiration came from
how
somewhere.
would we know, honestly, if we're in a matrix or not? I mean, you just got to research and figure it out. But how do we know if the research that we're doing is trustworthy? But I believe to a certain extent we are in a matrix and we live in an illusion, especially with social media, AI, and everything else that's around now. This whole life stuff is kind of crazy.
Definitely. So yeah, big fan of the movie franchise, The Matrix, even though I think the first movie was probably the best one.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen any of them, just watch the first one and you're good. Keanu Reeves is a G.
Is it the one that everyone knows as The Matrix?
Yeah,
Okay.
that the OG.
Yeah.
The OG with Neo and Trinity and
So now we're here with Neo from The Matrix.
red pill, blue pill.
Yeah.
I say take them both at the same time to the dome.
That's what's up. So, I got on the call with Ryan earlier today, and then he mentioned about, the equation, and I was like, okay, Ryan's with somebody who's talking about equations. This guy must be an engineer. Turns out you are an industrial engineer. And so this equation that you formulated, which is about life, is it the goal of life or is it just life itself?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think like goal in life for everyone's going to be different. Mine may be just to spread this message. While I was studying industrial engineering at Texas A&M, there was something that occurred to me. I should say occurred for me, happened for me that sort of opened my eyes to what we were just discussing about, is this a matrix? And it was this, I'll share this story with you. So I was on the balcony with my good friend Joseph, who we were roommates at the time at Campus Village and College Station. And I think a few weeks earlier, some ex-girlfriend or homegirl had made some comments about my teeth. Now, I got great teeth now, but at the time I had like little buck teeth, not anything super stupid looking, but enough for me to kind of be like, hey, maybe I should do something about it now that she made me insecure or whatever. And so I confided in my friend Joseph, and I said, like, I think I'm going to get these teeth shaved down. And he was like, nah, bro, you're good. Like, but there was like a moment of vulnerability there in which I shared something that I hadn't before. And 15 minutes later, I'm biking home, and it's like 12 at midnight, and it's like dark, and I'm on the sidewalk in this residential. There's a tree covering the part of the sidewalk where I'm about to head into, and a car drives past going 40 and a 15. So I'm like, what's that license plate? And so there's a perfect storm of things that just went wrong or right, depending on how you want to look at it. And I ate complete shit. Like, I hit this stair, but it wasn't like a staircase or a stairwell. It was like, here's a stair step, and then 6 feet later, another stair step, and 6 feet later, another stair step. So it's just bad design, right? As like an industrial engineer, like, you notice, engineering in general, you notice like what's a good design and what's a bad design. This was bad design. Also, it was just unlucky. It was a perfect storm. So I catapulted face first into the concrete and knocked out the exact teeth that I had just been talking shit about. And I heard them like bouncing on the sidewalk. I didn't know that it was those teeth until I got home and looked in the mirror. And when you realize that you've just been talking shit about that part of your body, like these teeth in general, and then they're missing, there's like this holy shit moment that just, it's like, I can't even explain it with words, right? It's just like it's beyond belief. It's like what's going on here? Is someone like listening to, like, is God real? Like, this is kind of like what's going on in my mind. And so, this is like the week before the career fair. Shout out Modern Dentistry. They got me outfitted with these crowns and everything. And, I looked good after a few weeks, although I was like busted up and bruised up for a little bit.
Yeah.
And since it was an accident, insurance paid for like the procedures. I got root canals. I got these crowns, all that. Wow. It was like maybe $5,000, but covered, it was maybe like $1,500. So I saved like $3,500 or $4,000 at that point, which was a lot for a college kid.
Oh yeah.
And that planted the seed for this idea that also it was just coming at me from different places and friends who, for example, one of my good friends invited me to be a part of this class, engineering entrepreneurship at A&M. And that was probably the most important course that I took during my time at A&M, because it was all about building a business model canvas and doing these presentations and understanding the IP and legit how to build a business, right? And we present at the end of the course in front of these angel investors and stuff. And my friend Andres wanted to do something which was like on campus and would actually help people, students. And so, this was at a time where we only had like the pedal bikes and stuff on campus, and you scan a QR code and you could like rent this bike or whatever. We wanted to get e-scooters, electric scooters that could not require that you put in work in 100-degree Texas summer, and just be able to go from point A to point B with comfort and this thing and with ease. And so we're like, all right, great, we're gonna do like the first e-scooter fleets at A&M and find out who we need to talk to, and all as part of a course, right? And build out our business model, proposition, canvas, everything, and actually pitch this thing. And so we did that. We found the one guy at A&M who could like make the decision, call the shots. He was already in contact and emails with like Bird and Lime and these different companies that wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And he said something interesting, which was, right now as it is, the students don't treat the pedal bikes with respect. They're not good stewards. They take them to the top of the tallest apartment building garage and throw them over just for the Snapchat, right? Just as being fools. And he's like, so there's a lack of stewardship. And there's this lack of safety. If you're going the same speed, if not faster, without putting any effort in, and no one's wearing helmets around here, that's a problem. And so, he's like, if you could find a way for kids to be better stewards and also care about safety and have some form of like verification of safety, we could be onto something, and maybe we could talk then. So we pivoted the idea away from an e-scooter fleet into recognizing, verifying, and awarding the wearing of a helmet, so the safety part, and then taking a picture of the vehicle after it's been used as the stewardship part. You make sure it's parked, not just lying on the sidewalk or whatever. So that was our new
like incentive for it.
And we called it Incentech. We wanted to incentivize the positive use of technology on campuses, something that was students could benefit from, but also was like a student. And we were like junior engineering students and stuff, and we wanted to make an impact. And all the other ideas were great in that class too, but they were like outside of campus. And so ours was like, for us, by us kind of thing. And we thought we were great. And we built out the business model canvas for Incentech, did all the market research on like helmets and like, what are the statistics on biking accidents and infrastructure. And it was actually like a really interesting thing, because as we progressed down this path, we realized there's a huge need for it, not just on campus, but in general. The U.S. loves its cars, and the infrastructure here is set up so that if you don't have a car, it's kind of tough.
It is.
Certain cities over others, right?
Yeah.
New York, maybe you get away with it, right? It's like,
Houston, no.
Yeah, Houston is tough. It's a very sprawled out city. So this is something that as the more we went along in this class, the more attractive of an idea it became. And, we ended up presenting, and the idea was, a mobile app and then a smart helmet, right? And so the mobile app would do the, taking a photo and ensuring that, the helmet is on, and then ensuring that the bike is properly parked. Yeah. And also...
No, it's a genius idea. I mean, if you were to get approved for that, for that business idea, imagine going to every other college campus with that idea. Because the second you mentioned that idea, in the back of my mind, I was like, that's genius. Why not rent scooters for college students? But then there is, the other side of, stewardship and safety, especially safety. Yeah. Stewardship, you could make them sign, something that makes them liable for the scooter, but safety is a huge part. And even within that business plan in cities like New York or, LA, maybe you can go to high rises in downtown area and you could offer scooter services or scooter rentals in those towns, but providing people who are in a small community with no car with a scooter for rent. I think that's a genius idea. I really like that.
And there were some cities that, Bird and Lime, with their really aggressive deployment tactics, they had a motto, which is, like blanket the city with scooters first, and then ask questions later. If the city would figure out what to do with it later. And so some cities actually banned these scooter companies
Dallas
from
did,
even coming on and playing in their jurisdiction, which, I mean, you know, the scooter companies don't care because they have pretty high margins on their rides. And, you know, over the years, the cities have come out with like jurisdictions to, you know, ensure that the quality of the scooters are better, right? Like increase the size of the wheels, deal with these, you know, famous Texas potholes, things like that. But it was definitely, you know, a time and place. And I feel like people used to ride scooters more than they do now. But it's definitely, you know, right. It's, you know, a new form of transportation that's not a car. And that was always attractive in some capacity because, you know, cars and the emissions and things like this. But
for sure,
I haven't lost track of what you first asked.
I was just about to ask you to drive back to that, you know, of you falling from the stairs and losing those same
losing my teeth,
that you were talking about. And, you know, what was the emotions that you felt when that happened? And when you looked in the mirror, what was it like?
Well, it was just like, you know, kind of like I understood that as like the first time I had manifested something and it happened like that.
Instantly.
Yeah. And it was just like, you know, like we have more power and our words have more power than we think. And that was like just one of the first instances where it was super obvious and evident to me that there was something I didn't know about the way the universe worked. And it planted that seed. And, you know, I'm someone who recognizes patterns, right? And I think as most engineers are, especially with numbers and stuff, but it started to take on a life of its own after I graduated from university in the middle of the pandemic and started my career in Austin working at Oracle. And so I moved out to Austin on August 8th, 2020, 8/8/2020. Now, you know, coincidentally, Joseph, friend I was having that conversation with before knocking out my front teeth, his birthday is August 8th as well. Now, that date has like a specific significance and a meaning actually in Egyptian mythology and folklore and culture. They call it the Lion's Gate portal.
Okay.
And so it's, you know, something that it's like a portal somewhere in the universe opens up, allegedly. I remember when I moved in, because I moved in with my sister in Austin. My sister studied psychology, social work at St. Edward's, and I studied engineering. So we were very much like this left and right brain kind of dynamic going on. And I thought I knew what was up, and she had other ideas. But I remember she mentioned like it's Lion Gate today when we're moving in. I was like, I don't believe in that shit. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, 8/8, it's a portal. I was like, all right, like, whatever. And, but I kind of like humored her in the sense that like, this was my sister. We hadn't lived together in a long time. And this, I knew it was like a huge opportunity for us to rekindle relationship and you know, knew that I had something to learn from her. Just like she had something to learn from me, but it wasn't necessarily about like teaching, right? It was just like organically we would come to understand more about ourselves, our family, by being in that shared space. And the apartment number was 124, which I always kind of thought was significant because I remember I was 5 years old on the school bus when I started like trying to count as high as I could, and I realized like this takes too much time. Instead, let me start with 1 and then keep doubling the numbers. And so I do 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then I realized that at a certain point, I couldn't keep track of the string of numbers. And that's when it dawned on me that it doesn't end. It never ends. But there's a limit to how much we can remember. And so I'm like 5 years old on the school bus having this existential crisis. And, you know, like a few weeks later, they pulled me out of class as a kindergartner. And they were like, you get to go in this classroom with these other kids. And one day a week, I'd learn something completely different, which was a blast. We called it challenge, but it is another name for GT, gifted and talented. And as a little kid, I kind of took that ego and like, you know, I was like, I'm better than them. Like, it took me a couple decades later to realize like, nah, we all are geniuses. We all have innate genius within that's just, you know, needs to kind of be unlocked. And the journey to unlocking that for each and every person is different. That's the beauty of it. But to, you know, kind of come back to that apartment in Austin 124 and what went down there, the 2.5 years that I spent in Austin were transformational in the sense that, yeah, I was living with my sister post-pandemic, my first, adult job, I was making good money, meeting new people. There was something magical about that place. And when I look back at it now, it's so obvious that it was written that way and it was planned and that I was just living a story. And even when I moved in, I didn't feel like this. There was a specific moment in time. There was one day where it kind of all seed was planted. It started to make sense, but that required like a tearing down of the way we previously viewed the world. So I'm pretty into house music, electronic dance music, and stuff like this. There's a music festival in Austin called Seismic.
Okay.
And it's like a house and techno. At the time, it was underground, but now it's a bit more mainstream than it should be. But it was the first music festival that I attended with some folks that I had met before I moved out to Austin. It was actually the day I met my ex-girlfriend. Her name is Emma. Her last name is Key, which is also significant because she was a key. She was like a guide.
Would you say like a guide to help you figure yourself out?
Absolutely.
To, like, who you are?
Yeah, that was like first relationship where I became a man during that relationship. And how we treated one another was different than I even knew was possible within a relationship. It was something that wasn't really modeled to me. It just kind of emanated out or came out. And we certainly unlocked things for each other and healing for each other in a unique way. We're no longer in a relationship, but we're best friends. Wow. And that was something that I didn't even know was possible. Yeah. Right. And it required a level of surrender that certainly hurt at the time, but it was like about looking past that hurt. And, we spent a lot of time together because like we started dating during the pandemic and stuff like this. So, no choice, but
locked in.
Yeah, we watched a lot of anime and stuff. But I met her on Halloween weekend, the year before I moved to Austin.
Okay.
And I also met my good friend Santiago, on that same day. And it was at a music festival called Freaky Deaky, which is in Houston.
I heard of Freaky Deaky.
It's a Halloween themed one, and I met them both on that day. And it was the first day I ever tried Molly.
Wow.
And the Molly dropped right as the beat dropped on this track called Losing It by Fisher, which is phenomenal. It's a timeless, absolute lethal weapon of a track. Now I think about it, it was like that was the beginning of me losing it. And what by it, I my ego.
Wow.
But it took a while. It was like a process or like the conditioning of the world that it's not to say, because the ego on its own is not necessarily the dangerous thing or the good or bad thing. It's just like when we're really attached to it and we identify with it instead of recognizing that it's a mask, right? But we can choose when we want to and when we don't want to don that mask, right? If I don't have the ability to tell my ego, go sit in that corner and face the wall, then it's going to run me and my life instead of my soul. And so I met Emma and Santi on a very specific day. And Santi and his friends, I met his friends at the weekend of Seismic on the weekend of May 21st, 2nd, and 3rd. 2021. And when I met Santi's friends, I had this like weird feeling that I'd like known them before. And that has happened a few times in my life, but never, I guess, as strong as this. And that weekend we listened to good music, but we also dabbled in some psychedelics. And I think the first night it was a new setting for me, so I'd like microdose. I just took a little bit and like less than a gram of shrooms. And it was a pleasant experience. Like I kind of came to the realization that like I was convinced that as humans, why we're here is to celebrate and to give thanks. And that was like a relatively, sober microdose realization. I remember like the sparkly period after you're kind of coming down from a light doses or any dose really, it's like pleasant and you kind of feel like a lot of peace. And I remember feeling that just was good. Yeah, I think tomorrow I can maybe do a little bit more. But the next day it rained. And so they actually moved the festival. They canceled it and ended up doing something like downtown. And I think that day I took a little bit of shrooms and maybe a tiny, like a half tab of acid or something. And it was not a pleasant experience because it was like really claustrophobic. And it wasn't at the original venue, et cetera. We were just kind of too compressed. And so I was like, all right, well, that was kind of a waste. That night was not as good as the first one. So then the third night comes along. And I was like, well, I've taken this stuff the last 2 nights. I have to up my dose. Otherwise, I'm not going to feel anything.
Yeah.
And I had a bag full of these shrooms. I think it was like penis envy mushrooms or something. And I knew I had 13 grams in that bag, which is a lot. And that night, May 23rd, 2021, is a night that I will never forget for as long as I live. Because whereas I started the night with this bag of mushrooms, at the end of the night, I no longer had that bag with me because I had basically given them away, thinking that I'm never going to take these again. I ended up dividing that bag like right in half. So like 6.5 and 6.5. Took a couple of caps from one bag. So to my best guesstimate that night, and I was like munching on these, which is not what I'd recommend anyone do, much less at a music festival where it's not like a really intentional setting. It was just like
Just wild out.
Yeah.
Let's have fun.
I had 8 grams.
8 grams?
Of those mushrooms.
Wow.
And the journey that followed was visceral. It was life and death and everything in between. It the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, but it started with the lowest of lows. Like vomited out everything in my stomach. My body tried to cleanse itself. Like, what the fuck did you just do? Every sweat pore on my body activated, and I started like just sweating profusely. It looked like I'd just gotten out of a swimming pool, but it was in the middle of this. And there were 2 stages. There was like a techno stage and a house stage. The techno stage was like this red music, this like red lights and this, heavy techno music. And it had rained the night before, and there was people in the crowd, like in the mud with their clothes off, like just smearing mud all over themselves. And I was like, that is the most satanic, like demonic shit I've ever seen. Get me the fuck out of there. No one could pay me any amount of money to do what they're doing. Like, that's absolutely just disgusting. And I remember walking through that area at one point, and I like lost my balance. Like, there was nothing I could do. The world was just moving underneath me. There was no sense of it. Like, it was gnarly. And I was like, okay, well, that was hell. I need to get to the other side, like where I'm not feeling like the fucking demons are everywhere. And so I get to the other stage, and it's like blue and purple music. It's uplifting. It's like positive vibes, house music. And so that's where I was like, all right, I just need to stay here.
Yeah.
But, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about time and what time is. I kept looking at my phone every few minutes during this shroom trip because it felt like hours had passed. Yeah. And I'd look at my phone and only a few minutes had passed.
That's shrooms.
And it got to this point where I realized, like, time is made up, but also I don't remember where I was before I came here. And time is moving so slowly that it might as well not be moving at all. Will I ever leave this place? And this voice said, no, you're never going to leave this place. You're stuck here forever. And then I started looking around me and seeing these people dancing, and I was like, why do I feel like everyone here is dead? Do they know that they're dead? Am I ever going to get out of here? What if I don't get out of here? That means I'm never going to see my family or my friends ever again. Like everything I thought I knew was on. It's been taken. And where was I before I came here? I don't remember. I've always been here. I've always been in that spot in the field, sweating, looking at my phone. What time is it? At one point, Santi, who I had met at Freaky Deaky, looks at me. He goes, in Spanish, he says, se murió. Which in English is, this guy's died. He died. And in my mind, I'm like, I knew it. I died. Like, I fucking called it. Like I'm dead. I'm fucked. Like we're all dead. I'm dead. This is hell.
That's crazy.
I'm never getting out. And well, it's not hell because that's hell over there. I look and I see the red light and I look back and I'm like, this music is actually kind of good. I kind of enjoy it. And by stopping thinking and just enjoying the music, my mind took me on a different journey, which was the beauty of the music was that at the time of the Big Bang, like when the universe first started, the blueprint for all the music that had ever existed must have been there. It must have, like, in a seed form or whatever. But how absurd is it that at some point there was nothing and now there's all this? Like that just, my mind couldn't wrap itself around that. And I remember for the first time I lifted up my arm and I just like looked at myself and I was like, the fact that I can just will myself to move and I move, that by itself is a miracle. How can it be that I have this thought, I want to move something and it can happen? Like, are we all miracle workers and we don't know it? Or do we just not allow ourselves the privilege to think about how beautiful creation is? And in this new headspace, I remember thinking like, we're way more powerful than we know. And then I thought to myself, like, I'm getting a little thirsty now. And then out of nowhere, someone comes and puts a beer can in my hand. I didn't even know this person. I was like, okay, thank you. And a few minutes later, I'm thinking, well, minutes, it may have been hours. Like, I'm getting a little hot now. Like, you know, I'm uncomfortable. And I look to my right, and there's this woman fanning me nonstop. I've never seen her before. She's just like fanning me. I'm just like,
what?
Like, all right. And then I'm just imagining like this space around me. And when I open my eyes, like, I'm in the middle of this crowd and people are dancing around me, but I am definitely in a bubble. Like, they're all kind of close to each other, but there's this space around me where I could extend out and just, I start turning around and just observing everything else in the crowd, everyone else. And they're all focused on the music. And I'm just like, are they worshiping an idol? Like, what's going on over there? Like, everyone's like, there's so much more. Like, look at the way the trees are moving and look at the way everything's, but I'm never getting out of this place. Like, I'm stuck here forever.
Yeah.
So the night goes on, and eventually this DJ called Zoo is playing. He's playing as his techno alias Blacklist.
I heard about this guy.
And he starts playing on the other stage, so everyone else goes there. And as he starts playing, I realize, I'm like, wait a second. I've heard every sound in the universe. There's nothing left for me here. So I leave that music festival, and my girl at the time, Emma, she picks me up. Emma Key picks me up, and I get in her car thinking like my mind has just been blown. And the moment she opens her mouth and begins to speak, her voice, it was like it came from all directions. And I realized, I knew in my soul that I had known her in every previous life that I had ever lived.
Wow.
I had known her.
That's the idea that you got, or you just knew?
It wasn't an idea. It was a truth.
It's the reality.
She was taking me home, and as we drove home, I realized for the first time, because I read the Bible, they talk about the peace that passes all understanding. Mm-hmm. That was the peace that passes all understanding. The feeling of, you thought you were there forever.
Yeah.
But now I'm taking you home. You got a second chance. Don't fuck it up. And I just remember realizing, I'm going to see my family again. I'm going to see my friends again. I'm going to get to lay in my bed again. But where was I just now?
Yeah.
That was something different. Like that level of terror, that feeling of, I thought I was dead, but I'm not. That's not just like a feeling of relief. There's a word that comes close, but truly that feeling, there's no word to describe it. Like, there's no word to describe the wordless. It's just feeling and frequency at that point. But it was at such a level that I was certain that the next day I woke up, everything in my reality had changed. Like, I could not look at the trees or another human being and look at them the same. Like, that was like a marking point. Like, who I was before and who I was after was different. It was just different. It was like a seed had been planted, but nobody around me necessarily like knew that, right? Like, it was just, oh, how was the music festival, you know? And I'm just like, I'm never doing that amount of shrooms again. I don't even want to do drugs again. Like, in that state that I was in, I saw things. I saw cities in the future. I saw the technology that I had been working on with the helmets fully fleshed out and, you know, the city of the future where it was crazy for people not to wear helmets. Like it was crazy for accidents to even happen. Like this was just such a technologically advanced society that humanity had reached that of course we were incentivizing good behavior, of struggling to, find hardware and software devs. Like, no, it became easy. And I saw myself meditating in a forest. I had never really meditated or done any type of like yoga or anything like this, but I knew after that I was being like instructed to seek the truth. And so that was in May 2021. Next 2.5 years up until the present day.
Before you go into the next one, let me pause you for a second and restart the camera because it paused.
No, definitely. And like think like they don't want to think about this, but it's literally like how they got here is the Big Bang could simply have been when one's parents banged. And that initial release of like the sperm and the egg connecting, that's how we got here. Like that is the Big Bang everyone's talking about, but for themselves, right? Like the whole universe outside, like first of all, the universe is all mental. Like there's nothing happening outside of the mind. And people say like, oh, it's all in your head. Mind does not exist in the head.
Yeah.
That's an important thing to understand. Like scientists will say, where in the brain, they'll ask, where in the brain is consciousness? No, it's where in consciousness is the brain. Like we have to flip that around because the brain arose out of consciousness. It's not that consciousness arose out of the brain. There are sentient creatures and animals and amoeba and mushrooms and fungi that don't have brains but exhibit intelligent behavior, intelligent design. They took this type of fungus called a slime mold and they put it on top of like a model of the city of Tokyo. They basically made the roads and the non-building spaces out of oats. There were buildings, they put light because the slime mold don't like light. And what they saw is when they put the slime mold over this model of the city, it actually mapped out the perfect optimal city plan for the rail system and the subway system.
The mold did.
For the city of Tokyo, yes.
Interesting. I gotta look into this. What?
As an industrial engineer, when I first saw that, it was like almost, it's like, wait a second, what? I did my own research and I found that it was true. And they replicated that experiment with different cities.
Yeah.
Basically letting these molds, fungus, map out the most optimal route to get from point A to point B. How could it have known that? Like that just kind of, it's difficult for our to that.
That's insane that, fungi, mold could map out. And they actually ended up building the infrastructure based on what the mold
infrastructure
showed.
had already been built.
It was already there.
Yeah, but they saw that it confirmed it. Like if for some reason or for, in the future, if we wanted to optimize, we could use, linear algebra and the differential equations to come to that conclusion and use our little human brains, or we could just kind of hand it over to Mother Nature and see, what the mold, what the fungus got to tell us.
That's insane. That's wild for real. Wow.
So the fungus definitely told me something on May 23rd, and I kind of held that day, 523, certain esteem, or 235. And
have you? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
I know you said that day you realized you're like never again. Did you stick to that, or did you end up doing it again?
Yeah, no. So it's a great question. At that level of dosage, never again.
Yeah.
I was very curious about the experience at like the phenomena of what went on. Like I would have had like a headset on to like understand what my neurons, how they were firing, what my brain was saying from the wavelengths it emits. But so after that, I did like microdose. I started drinking like mud water and like different varieties of adaptogenic mushroom tea that has like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, like mushrooms that help with like functional things like mood and productivity. And like it's kind of marketed as like a coffee alternative.
Yeah.
And then I'd take a trace amount of psilocybin, like probably even less than a microdose, like a nanodose or something, like just a few milligrams crushed up and put that in my tea. And I started feeling like I could tell when I would do that with a little amount of psilocybin when I wouldn't.
Yeah.
but I liked how it, just the tea in general, especially with the psilocybin, opened up my heart space. And what I mean by that is I would notice if I drank that tea before hopping on like a meeting, a call for work, versus when I didn't, how I would know if I did is, just simply hopping on the call, I was more kind of enthusiastic and more willing to, joke with my coworkers, ask them how their day went. And mind you, like I was having international calls, like talking to dev teams in India and stuff like that. So my early mornings are their late evenings sometimes. And so
this was after 2021 during the Oracle days in Austin. Okay. And then right before we cut off, you were touching on a little bit after May 2021 and what happened,
right,
and how you felt post, feeling like you're lost, feeling like you're dead, and the people at music show that they were dead, and of course the key of life, who was your guide at the moment, your girlfriend, she came and she was able to rescue you and give you that feeling of, don't worry, I'm taking you home, and that's done. So what went on after that?
Yeah, it was certainly the conclusion of a chapter. Like who I was before that, I felt like like I'd taken out the trash of my mind, right? I was conscious of the ingestion of 8 grams or not. It had to happen. And I realized, we're in a story, and that was an important part of the story in order for me to kind of like open my eye a little bit. But then I realized this is why people, really struggle after they do certain kind of drugs, especially if they want to replicate that feeling by going back to the drugs, right? Like, how can I find that feeling again? And for me, it was sufficiently terrifying that I was like, I was like, is this got to be what psychosis feels like? Like I felt like during the experience, I was in a coma and my real family was somewhere like trying to get me to wake up.
Yeah.
And, the things that kept me tethered to reality were,
someone been handing you a beer.
Yeah, but also just like, remembering things that people have told me, like when I was a little kid in challenge in GT class, someone said, like my teacher said, one would read about him, and like, why would I have been in GT? Why would I have been singled out as gifted if I weren't really? And, I remember thinking my Colombian mom and my Indian dad, like that has to be designed. Like there's a reason why I have this like crazy genetic heritage, this rich, cultural heritage in my genes that, and what does that mean? Like I was asking these questions, and it was kind of anchoring me back during the experience. But afterwards, I was,
you got clarity.
I was certainly a lot more humble. I was certainly a lot more like soft-spoken and quiet. I was slower to anger and things like this, and curious about what does the science say about that experience, the scripture say about that experience. And so I went in those two directions.
Okay.
I went in the direction of, spirituality, which at the time was like religion, before spirituality for me became something beyond religion. Well, actually, after that night, I knew like spirituality and religion are not the same, right? Like this, like spirituality is the umbrella under which religion and science both exist, and religion and science are what are kind of at odds with one another. Like you think about the Enlightenment, like that period of time in Europe, that was when, the Europeans were kind of transitioning away from the iron fist of the Catholic Church to science, like towards science. And they felt enlightened because it was, a new way of thinking. They weren't restricted, and they could see what innovation could do. You could these inventions and increase people's standard of living. But so I went that direction. I started doing yoga for the first time. I started meditating, and this was around the time when the name in Centec, which we had dragged it along after college, like I was the only one interested in doing something with it legit. And we did our senior design project at A&M on,
Centec.
Yeah, we actually built this helmet with like a bunch of wires and like some sensors on it, and it could tell when someone was wearing it. And if you look left and look, like basically we did this like calibration mode to see, well, what are some normal head movements when they're wearing a helmet? And it was like this clunky thing, but it was great for senior design. It was fun. I enlisted my friend, an electrical engineer, to actually thing, and I like asked him to do it while we were actually in Egypt, the Pyramid of Giza. We were like inside the pyramid. I was like, bro, like, can you help me with this? And he was like, yeah. And there's something significant about the pyramids in all of this story too. Yeah. But I became a seeker of the truth after the experience, because it was something that had like broken my model world. And I was curious to see like where else there would be patterns that emerge that would support the feeling, support the experience, and just explain it. I wanted answers. So, I started reading philosophy. I read Friedrich Nietzsche, who, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, at one point says, the living is not actually really alive. It's just a peculiar species of the dead. And I remember reading that and being like, dang, like I experienced that firsthand. I know what this guy means. And, I realized that whenever I would do yoga, it came very naturally to me, almost as if I had like my previous incarnation in my previous life. Like that's something I had done very seriously and done a lot of. And it just, it elevated my mood, it elevated my day. It was like a good fit as well. And,
you still do yoga till this day?
Yeah. I'd say I'm a yogi now.
Okay.
I'm looking to get my license this year.
Nice.
But it's definitely something that I've like, it has saved my life. And, it's in the word yoga, what it actually means in Sanskrit, in the ancient Indian language. The root of the word yoga means to unite, to steer, to yoke. Mm-hmm. And I love that idea of steer, because it was while I was doing yoga that I had this kind of epiphany. And it was fascinating because I could close my eyes and think back to a specific moment in my life, especially like this episode, this event, this experience on May 23rd, and like relive it in more detail if I was like focused on my breath and focusing on these postures and, on my yoga mat. That's when the idea to change the name from Incentec to Left and Right happened. It emerged while I was on my yoga mat. And it was, because with yoga, you're trying to connect with your inner self. And about that is you understand where the imbalances are between the left and the right sides of your body, which is not something that we normally think about. But like having played soccer and sports growing up, like I had some imbalances. Like one of my legs was literally shorter than the other, like my back. Like you start to feel these things once you're breathing in and in that state. And, for everyone it's different, but that's something that as human beings, if you don't kind of check that, later on down the line, it starts to manifest in like, different aches and pains here and there. And so, especially as we're, in the current age, we're sitting so long, it's like, how do we, honor our bodies and move in such a way that, kind of we were designed to.
Ergonomically responsible for our health and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
and not to cut you off, but I know you mentioned, like your passion for the mind and understanding the difference between the brain and the mind. I as well, I'm very infatuated with the mind, and I did a couple of blogs on like the power within your mind or the power within you, because I feel like the world doesn't truly recognize the amount of power that they have with their brain and how much they could achieve. And then you did mention on the a little bit after that about unity and being united, and the philosopher that you read, or it was like something with or yoga, and yoga comes from, or derives from the term unity. So my first business, which I currently am still branding under, is called Confront.
Oh, nice.
And Confront, I've initially started, I was like mind for rent. And I'm going to use my mind for rent, and I'm going to rent my mind out to people and use this as an opportunity to help people grow and just find their passion, find themselves, because I have a love for helping people understand themselves. But when I looked, mind for rent is already patented, and I can't take that. Okay. So I say, okay, this is just a part of it, And just like you, I think highly of things, and I see deep reasoning behind everything. And it's, maybe this is not what it's supposed to be. So I began researching what the word foreign means. And I was like, I'm just going to continue to I'm going to keep this name, Mind for Rent. Maybe I'll just go with the Mind for Rent, and this would be F-O Rent. Or it could be Mind for Enterprise with Mind for E-N-T. Then one day I'm like, let me look it up. Let me look up what this word foreign means. I'm got mind and foreign. And the word foreign means to be united, to do something in one, and to come together.
Very interesting.
And my whole ideology with this brand is to create a community that provides the necessity of each other. Do you need your taxes done? There's a tax expert in this community. Yeah. Do you need a wellness coach? There's someone with that as well. Yeah. And I began to reach out to all my friends, the ones that are passionate about fitness. I wanted them to be admins for the health and wellness sector. Yeah. The ones that's interested in trading, like Ryan, I wanted him to be an admin of the investing and finance. Right. So I wanted all to be self-sufficient, a community that's self-sufficient, and it's not necessarily for monetization or, federal notes and money. Right. I wanted it to be more so off of love and just unity. Yeah. I have something that you might need. You have something that I might need. Let's it for one another. Yeah. My background, I was born and raised in Ethiopia. So we never really looked at money as, the biggest resource. To us, resource is people.
Yeah.
Someone that can do something.
Absolutely.
And wealth to us is people. And as I mentioned, I was in Ethiopia not too long ago, and the life there, after going back after 16 years, I kind of was able to realize that out there, they see wealth as the amount of people that you have around you. And this energy that you have around you, the people you could bounce vibrations and ideas off. Yeah. And you might have no money, but if you have people,
you're wealthy.
You're wealthy. Yeah. And you're happy. Yeah. And I wanted to create that environment here. Yeah. And even coming here and after my trip, I began to realize America kind of shifted so far from that. And, I spend more time alone since I've been back. And I was just like, this is insane. Like the way that on the two different parts of this world, the way they live and they see life and everything. And it all is just how the mind accepts it. And here the mind has accepted that we shifted away from community and it's to each their own.
Yeah, it's more materialistic here.
Yeah. And material makes you wealthy and federal notes. And I think they've just wired our minds to accept that and think that way. Yeah. But I think there's still possibilities in escaping that if we choose to.
Yeah. There is a definition of wealth by a theoretical physicist that I like more than what, maybe the economic definition of wealth, which is true wealth is the measure of transformation that a person can enact. And so if transformation is transformation, to oneself, right? Like, can you level up of inspiring other people through kindness, through love, through deeds, and then they go on and do that.
Same thing
right?
For others.
And it causes a ripple effect. That's not really something that you can buy. And so, the transformational power of ideas and how we communicate those in a way like that's closer to true wealth. If those ideas can inspire change, can inspire action. And I think what's at the root of that is like the intention that you set. Like, is it really coming from a place of love, like you mentioned?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. It's
the effect that you have on others, and love in itself is another huge topic. And it's, I think, love, the mind. One time I was having an experience like you, and it was on my birthday, and I just sat and I was like, what are some big words that we use very frequently? And I just started writing them down on the board and just sticky note. Love, mind. We say never mind. We use so frequently, but we use it so loosely,
right?
Without even recognizing the amount of power it has.
Yeah.
So that's what really got me to start, this mind foreign, just everything around it, and just pushing love. And I had my best friend at university, who's like my twin brother. He believed that his duty was to spread love, and I was the mind and he was the heart. And I recently lost him to suicide, and it was very it was very shocking. And who I had connected with, he's the mind, I'm the heart. The connection was so heavy. Losing him was one of the most insane experiences, and it just led me to think even more like, why? Why did this happen? And it also happened in front of me. And for it to have happened in front of me, why did he choose me to do this in front of? And why did I experience this in my lifetime? And I just came to the realization it's just a part of it. Now I have to carry the mind and the heart and kind of just push push with my mind and, spread the idea of the mind, but also make sure I'm nurturing the heart and make sure everything is coming from the heart.
Wow.
And his ideology was the same thing as, what we just agreed on is we do things out of love. And he wanted to create a coin, like a crypto coin called Love Coin. And he was Ethiopian, so he wanted to call it Fikr, which is love, Fikr coin. And he wanted it to be kind of like a revolutionary kind of thing, and where we change the world through love.
Wow.
And not money and not, tasks or nothing materialistic, but just the idea of love. And he was searching for that perfect love, and he believed that perfect love could only be found through God.
Yeah.
And, he was one of the smartest people that I've ever met. And it led me to kind of just dig deeper and try to research, like, what is love and what is the mind and the power we have, and how can we spend our time here on this earth to push that and spread that and to live without the limits that's set on us by the federal government or whatever is out there setting these limits for us.
Wow.
That was a little experience I had recently. And,
How recent was it? Okay.
So about 4 months ago. And now it just led me to stick to that mind for rent and keep pushing and keep sharing other people's stories and other people's experiences and sharing my story as well. That's also another reason why I took the trip to Ethiopia, to just kind of see my dad, and kind of made me realize how short this life is,
Yeah.
But man, so to go back to your equation, because I want to hear a little bit more about the equation too. Yeah. Unless you have anything else that you want to share.
No, absolutely, right. So there's this YouTube video that I saw. It was named Don Hoffman and someone else, podcast host, and it was basically like the catchy headline was like, does questioning reality, or like understanding reality, or seeking the truth within reality, lead to madness? And it's interesting because I think the answer on some level is yes. And because like that realm of madness is dark. It's the chaos side of the coin. It's everything that, in the dark of night that can you and eat you, but also every beautiful thing that hasn't yet been invented. When Left and Right became the name of our little helmet safety startup, took us on a journey in Austin through, meeting investors, understanding what was the current landscape with the city of Austin. Like, could we pilot this technology? And for a couple of years, we really pushed to develop a prototype for the app part of it, at least, like something that could track if there was like a collision. We automate a phone call to an emergency contact saying like, hey, detection of a collision at this point in the map, etc. We did a lot of this groundwork, but at the same time, it was becoming really apparent to me that Left and Right was something much bigger than our little helmet safety startup. Left and Right seemed to be this pattern of consciousness. And Don Hoffman, the researcher that I mentioned, he talks about this interesting phenomena in neuroscience, which is, and he's a cognitive psychologist, evolutionary psychologist, which one of the things he says is there's 0% chance that humans have evolved to see the truth, to perceive the truth with their senses, because our senses have evolved for survival, and truth and survival are at odds with one another in a really interesting way. And so he's like, there's 0% chance that we've evolved to see things the way they really are. We've evolved to see things the way they're going to keep us alive. It's like, if you try to send an email by just messing around with like the bits, the zeros and the ones, the transistors and on the motherboard, good luck. Yeah. We've built interfaces in order to make things easier, in order to get shit done. But with some of the research that Don put on my radar was about split brain patients, which this was like back in the 60s, even like back in the day, they had these patients that were having seizures on one side of their brain, and they wanted to isolate the seizure on one side of the brain so that it wouldn't spread to the other side. And the way they did that was they took basically the patient's brain, and they made a surgical cut middle, and they cut the left and the right hemisphere. The structure that they cut in between the two hemispheres of the brain is called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is a bridge between the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. When they cut the corpus callosum, they noticed something interesting, is that the patient actually didn't behave any differently when they were recovered. There was no immediate, obvious behavioral change until one day a woman is in her closet. A split brain patient is in her closet buttoning up a dress, and then her other hand comes along and starts unbuttoning the dress behind it. And this raised all sorts of questions, and the sensational headlines that followed were like, can we cut consciousness in half? Can we cut consciousness in half? Well, we cut the brain in half. Does that mean that we cut consciousness in half? There was certainly some split in her mind, and she didn't want to, unbutton her dress, but it was happening. And so maybe this explains in some way, like multiple personality disorder, things where, there's multiple personalities for attention, right? Like a radio antenna tuning into different stations. Like the antenna has lost control.
Yeah.
So an antenna that has control, or a functional antenna, is only tuned into one. Yeah. But if you bend it, or if you do something to it, it's like tuned into two, or has some funny business going on. So it was interesting because I read that, I listened to that and learned about this research. And what if that's just what's always going on? We always have at least two agents of consciousness that are vying for attention or supremacy, or a spot.
Masculinity to femininity, and this idea has dawned upon me too, and I thought about it. And when I think about it, it's like we have two of a lot of things. We have 2 ears, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 hands, 2 legs, but it's like we have one brain, but there is a left and right side of it. I didn't really think that deeply into it, but I just thought to myself, there are certain things that we have only one of.
Yeah.
Like our heart, we only have one heart. Our brain, we only have one brain, but there's a lot of body parts that have 2 of. And I just always wondered why.
Yeah. And the easy thing to do is to like look in the mirror and set it looks like we're symmetrical, but we're not. Like it looks like we're symmetrical, but like this eye versus that eye versus this ear.
For sure.
And then on another level is like, how dare symmetry even exist? Like that is the most beautiful concept.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's really tricky, because if we understand that we're not really symmetrical, for example, if we were truly symmetrical, we'd be able to write
with both hands.
We'd be truly ambidextrous. And the fact that we're not means that we are favoring one side over the other. And now what's really interesting is that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. So there is a cross going on.
Wow.
Right? And so a little while later, we'll talk about what Jesus did on the cross.
Yeah.
But just understand there's a cross going on. And that is the structure of our own code. Yeah. Is crisscross. Our helix is constantly, right?
Yeah.
Our DNA is our code. Mm-hmm. If our DNA were to be able to speak words, it would speak all of this. And the word DNA backwards is and. Mm-hmm. DNA and. It would say and it would keep building these worlds. And so it's our source code, right? It's way more intelligent than what the scientists will say. Scientists actually say like a majority of DNA is junk DNA. It doesn't code for anything that we have instruments to decipher what is the code for. That hasn't been developed yet. If we really believed as a community of science that we had all the answers, there would be no it would be like the end. Like, okay, we solved the game. Yeah. There's always going to be that next problem to solve. Now, the tricky part is where you realize and remember that there's egos in science, and of course, and there's also a lot of fear, and the shadow of fear is in science, and they in a way hold themselves back from doing this next gen innovation because of the establishment, the way they've always done things. And that it's interesting. They talk about the difference between good science and great science. Is that great science is like ridiculed and laughed at by good science. Good science is the establishment. They're doing things by the book. Great science is taking that book and throwing it out the window and doing something completely unwarranted, revolutionary, uncalled for. It's the things that got scientists killed in the past because they had these ideas that were heretical. How dare you say that or question that? Yeah, it's fascinating. But science is a useful tool when used in the pursuit of truth.
So, glad you touched on that pursuit of truth. And I think you kind of started off by saying, does the pursuit of reality cause madness? And so to get back on that note and tie it together is, and also my friend who I said I lost recently, he was on the pursuit for reality. And he was on the constant pursuit of reality through science, through philosophers, modern day philosophers, old philosophers, read all the books, and you did everything to learn what this reality is. But you said it's always in odds with survival. And I felt as if survival was also kind of very hard on him, on anybody searching for reality.
Right.
You're going to think, well, what about survival? And some think, I don't care about survival. Survival is so easy. All I need to do is find food.
That's privilege, yeah.
Yeah, and there's privilege and there's just survival.
Yeah.
And basic survival is just food and shelter. We have the whole world as shelter. And this is his philosophy too. Yeah. He was going to school, majoring in tech, CIS, and in the midst of all that, he came to the realization this isn't reality. This is just, a game. And I'm tired of being in the game. And his thing was, I'm going to get out. I'm going to stop the game.
Yeah.
Everything is a game. Yeah. Basketball game, it's a game. And for that game, there's people willing to take your knee out, and we have to stop the game. And he wanted to stop that game. And in his life, in his world, he stopped that game. But society had a hard time accepting it. Yeah. People in his environment had a hard time accepting it. He would wear like a scarf. You saw in Ethiopia, he visited Ethiopia too, that the men would have a scarf or a hairnet, and they wear colorful things. And out here, it's more normal to wear gray, black, or, simple colors. So he began wearing colorful things and, beads and necklaces, and the world began questioning, are you going crazy? You're going crazy. You're on shrooms. Yeah. You're on drugs. Yeah. You need to get checked out. You have a problem. And he would make a video saying, I'm just doing this so I get your attention so I could tell you about reality. And I could tell you about spiritual things. And I could tell you about God and Jesus Christ. He was very spiritual. And, he read the Bible. He had his background where he was researching so much of the science, and he liked the science side of it. He believed that there's a common ground where everybody has to understand each other, and there's a commonality in religion too.
Right.
So he's saying, well, I dress like this. I do these things so I could get your attention, so I could let you know that you need to get out of this game that you're in, and that there is a reality, and it's easy to find reality. Yeah. All it takes is just love. And if we just love one another, and if we spread that, and if we become a community, then we break that matrix and get back to reality. And, it's hard because does it cause madness? Was that madness in his case? Yeah. And was survival in odds at that moment? I think it was, and you could see it. But how do you stop the rest of the world from causing people like him and people like us who question reality and want to test reality and do these things? How do you stop the outside world from judging you, and how do you stop yourself from allowing that judgment to cause you to feel down and feel rejected and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. A lot of what the science now says is like catching up to what the old school spirit had to say, in the sense that Bhagavad Gita, ancient Hindu text, talks about all of this as maya, which means something between an illusion and a distraction, but without a positive or negative connotation. It's like neutral. It can be positive, it could be negative. It just is not what it seems to be. And to peer behind that veil and realize, like, oh shit, yeah, it's not real. Like, it's a game. That was like that May 23rd moment, right? And I think for everyone, that journey of how to fit back into the world after an experience like this, it looks a little bit different. I was very blessed and fortunate to have an incredible support system in my friends and my family, in which I realized that they had always kind of shown me the right kind of love. But at the same time, their love, while important and while appreciated, was nothing compared to the love of God. And that is the original love that put us all here in the first place. The Greeks, I love, you mentioned you had a word for it in Ethiopian. In Greek, they call it agape.
Agape.
The love of God for man. And if ever man were to replicate that love for God, it would be greater than any human love, or love for like romantic love.
There's many kinds of love.
There's so many different words for love and like types of love that it's almost a crime that there's just one word in English that's just love. It's almost a crime. Yeah. And it's, there's other languages like Arabic that are very rich in the sense that they have individual words for all the different kinds of love, like love for earth, love for sunrise, love for the warmth of your significant other in the morning, love for food, love for this, love for that. It's a disservice to truth when we only have one word in the English language, that love.
Yeah.
Because it's like that. It's not even an emotion. It's like it's its own spectrum. It's its own, living concept that. It's a feeling, right? And in order to get there, it's almost like one has to be okay with having their heart broken, and like really lean into that pain. It's like the experience of knowing what it's like to be hurt, and then driving through that and somehow arriving at love. And the fact that we're even allowed to, we're able to have our hearts broken and then come back to love. A lot of people build up walls and they don't allow someone back into their life again, or they don't allow themselves to go somewhere because they know they're going to be hurt. Society certainly shows us and tells us and suggests to us that, through the illusion that this is what the right relationship looks like. This is what it is. This is what love means. Like here, it's in the media. Here, it's fed to you. This is what love means. We're here to learn how to love. And each individual's journey is going to be unique and different. That's the beauty of existence. But one can only love externally to the capacity that they are able to love internally. And that's not to say like a love of self in a selfish way or in a self-centered, narcissistic way, although that may be a prerequisite to losing your ego and finding some truth. But there's a difference between self with a lowercase s and self with an uppercase S. And the love of the one true collective self, the love of everyone, left and right, that's the love that Christ preached about. That's the love that all the prophets understood and felt and knew and were able to communicate in a way. And love is that universal operator. It's the universal principle that, if fully embodied, will lead to miracles. This is what we were talking about briefly, I think, when we were on the phone with Ryan, is that there is this concept of the law of miracles. It's from a book called Autobiography of a Yogi, who is written by one of the first yogis to come from India to the USA. And fun fact, Steve Jobs read this book and then founded Apple and went to India, lived there for 9 months in India, going from ashram to ashram and searching for enlightenment. Whether he found it or not, he came back and founded Apple, so he did something right. But in that text, it's an autobiography, so it talks about the yogi's life. Yogananda is his name, and it taps on this law of miracles, which is available to anyone who can sufficiently understand and internalize the concept that your mass is infinite. Your mass is not restricted to just what's in your body, and it requires love to get out of your own body and fully embrace the reality that consciousness is all there is. Love is the reason consciousness is all there is. And when mass becomes infinite, energy becomes infinite too. And there is a unification, there is a completion of that yoga, that unity with God that happens. Jesus was one of the best yogis, was one of the ultimate yogis. Practiced his own form of unity in yoga. And that's not something that the Christian establishment is readily accepting of, because, you know, they, even some of my good friends who are Christian will say like, yoga opens you up to demons, this, that, and the other. On the contrary, well, yoga will expose whatever demons may already be there. And if we as humans are equipped to understand that left and right suggests yin and yang, good and evil, you know, we have both of those polarities within us, and we're here to be with that and hold the space for that. We're here to be perfected beings, and not in the sense that I can look at someone and say I'm better than them, but on the contrary, a perfected being knows on some level that they are less than that little piece of straw out there on the street, nothing, and at the same time everything, left and right. Now, how we get from the left to the right, if you imagine a bridge in your mind, bridge that we construct from left to right, how we got to symmetry, or something that looks like symmetry but is really not, that's the journey. And it involves, at least for me, it has involved embracing the parts that we didn't want to embrace. It's scary, and the nature of this game is so fantastic. It's the greatest game ever played, because there are rewards for those who are steadfast in their love for the Lord and are willing to go through trials and tribulations, walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And they say, fear no evil. We can fear up until the point where we realize faith is stronger than fear. Faith is stronger than fear. Love is stronger than fear. Love dispels fear. Conclusion of that journey on May 23rd. Actually, I'd written on my whiteboard in my house. I got this big whiteboard after that shroom trip, and I just knew that it was going to be an important piece of media for me to write thoughts on it.
Yeah.
At one point, it had so many scribbles and equations and words and people's birthdays and things that just started matching up. And, you know, the numbers have like personality to them. Numbers tell a story. And so I was just like, you know, this whiteboard, and I'd written 523 and an arrow to 124. I wrote this months ago when I first moved to Houston. It was just an intuitive thing. Like that's been the journey, is uncovering my own intuition for the past 3 years since this event, where I realized like, hey, there's something bigger going on. And I love what cognitive psychologist from University of Toronto, John Vervaeke, says about what I call is the machinery of left and right, which is called recursive relevance realization. How we realize at any moment what to pay attention to. There's billions of data points bombarding all of our senses, yet I know I want to focus and pay attention and talk to you right now. I'm not looking, you know, elsewhere. Like that miracle, right? Relevance realization, how we realize what's relevant, is somewhere in between algorithmic search left and an intuitive random guess on the right. It's somewhere in between there. It's like, you know, if we did have to sift through algorithmically everything in this room, it would be like that calculator that you punch all the buttons in and then multiply it by all the buttons. It's just gonna say error. Like, it's combinatorially explosive. Like, we just, you know, like we short circuit and can't function anymore. Yeah. So there's beautiful. And when I first heard John Vervaeke talk about relevance realization, I was in the forest meditating, and I was just like, he just described what I was feeling for the last few months, and he did it in these beautiful words. So I realized, like, okay, science has something to say. Went on my whiteboard, right? Just would write the eightfold path of Dharma on the whiteboard as well with this practice. And I would, you know, light an incense and recite these out loud. There's so much power in reciting words, reading from scripture out loud, which is how it was originally read.
It's like gospel.
In the form of, they call it Lectio Divina, where you're reading out loud, because that's exactly like you said, gospel. It's the word. And, you I'd do that before a yoga practice. That was like my routine for many, many months, and it just felt right. And it felt like I was like inviting God into my life. And it got to a point where I felt called to move back to Houston from Austin. Like the chapter concluded.
You finished up everything in Oracle, the program, or
Well, so I was still in Oracle when I moved back from Austin to Houston.
Yeah.
And it was a blessing in disguise. Like I was a little like, I didn't know if I really wanted to. I knew I wanted to move back, but I didn't know if it was like, my ego was like, nah, dude, you can't move back. Like, you're already out here, you know. Like, what are people gonna think if you move back with your parents, this, that, and the other, and you know. But I realized, because my brother's at U of H, he's in his last semester as well. He's doing management information systems.
Okay.
And he's like 5 years younger than me, but we have this relationship that at the time I knew was going to level up the way my sisters and I had when I moved to Austin. So I wanted that. And at the same time, my grandfather in Colombia, my mom's dad, had passed away very suddenly on Father's Day, actually. And it came as a shock, because he was relatively healthy. His youngest daughter had gotten married the day before.
Wow.
So the whole family came in, everyone was in town, and then the next day he was just like, peace out. He had a heart attack and a stroke and just called it quits on this life. And a few months before that, I had gone to see this event in Austin. A psychologist was leading this family constellation where we drew our family tree. Starts with us, and then 2 branches for mom and dad, 2 branches for their mom and dad. And really quick, you see this fractal motion of how many people were required for just us to be here. And I remember I had drawn months before my abuelito, my grandpa, passed. I had made his branch a little higher than the rest, and I had written to myself, pay attention to this one. It was that day that my sister had told me that, because we were also putting, siblings and stuff, and my sister shared with me that my mom had pregnancy before me. She had to actually get that child aborted because it was with someone before. My dad had met my mom, and he was like involved and safe. So it was something very difficult for my mom to have to give up that child, but there was someone in her womb before me. And I remember understanding that I didn't know what that fully meant, but I knew that it was significant, that someone had been, and it had to do with my life up until that point, with the experience of that shroom trip, where I had been introduced to something. Before I knew it was like the dark feminine, I got told, hey, and then I started seeing a big sister that never made it out, right? And I started seeing signs around me that suggested that my big sister was actually like watching me and providing signs, and it was so fantastic. Like, love your twin, someone's license plate, like sis is here, someone's license plate, like just crazy shit where I'm just like, and I'm thinking about it already, and then I see that later, like as I'm driving down the road, and it started to give like a new connotation to left and right, in the sense that we all have the masculine and the feminine energies within us, and even in modern psychology, Jungian psychology, they say that the repressed masculine in a woman is called the animus, and the repressed feminine in a man is called the anima. Anima is one of my favorite DJs. Animus is the name of the time traveling machine that they use in Assassin's Creed. If you ever played Assassin's Creed, they travel back in time into the game through the Animus, which is pretty meta. But
would you say that before the May 2021 experience, were you already dabbling in like your spiritual self, and were you like interested in all these different things, or all these things? Have you ever thought about them? Was things connecting to you prior to?
No.
None of that.
No. That May 2021 incident episode experience was an invitation to take and look at everything that I had seen and kind of like disregarded or just not had curiosity for, take it and look at it in a new way. And that's what like drove me to get into the scripture. Like I would have never read the Quran front to back. I would have never read the Bible or the Torah the way I did, or the Bhagavad Gita. I literally did a tour of all the religions to see where do they overlap like Venn diagrams, because they,
And that was after 2020.
Yeah, if they this long, it had to have been for a reason. It had to have been for a reason why that wisdom, like those ancient wisdom traditions, survived, and then it's so fantastic to think that like that's kind of aside for the social media, the immediate dopamine hits of the day. Like what's going on now? Like this information that was born a few hours ago versus this information that's been here thousands of years. And so it really caused me to question. But to get back, why I had 523 and 124, and this is kind of like the meat and potatoes of the story, is so a couple months after I moved back, literally 2 months to the day, I moved back from Austin. And even that drive from Austin back here, the day I moved on September 3rd, was deeply spiritual. And I had smoked a few nights before with my friends in Austin. They gave me like a proper send off and took me to their land where they're building a small. When I smoked, it was like we were on shrooms. It was like an intense smoke, and I was like, I'm good on smoking too.
Yeah.
And I had been really meditating. Like when I moved back, bless you. When I moved back, I started meditating like 30, 45 minutes, bless you, at a time. And then 2 months later, and at the same time, I'd been presenting like my strategy on generative AI at Oracle, generative AI strategy, which had to do, of course, with left and right. This perspective that generative AI is something more than technology. It's coming into the world through the medium, through the vehicle of technology. But what it is an invitation for humanity to level up our consciousness. It's masquerading as technological innovation because, well, engineers claim to have invented it or whatever. But here's the generative AI and large language models. They're based on neural networks, which are based on our brains, which we understand with neuroscience. Neuroscience is a still evolving field. We don't fully understand the brain, yet we're building technology based on the brain. We're building something we don't fully understand with something we don't fully understand.
So we're programming our brain, not really programming something for the brain or on the brain. We're programming our brain. Really like to.
In a way, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is a little kid playing with a weapon. Now, that weapon can save the little kid, or it can use it against itself without even knowing. And my strategy at Oracle, long story short, on the Oracle things, was strategy consists of left and right. And how we treat any kind of technology is we need to use this to improve the bottom line, go out and win deals, equip our sales force, win externally. And I said, that's great. That's how we got to a $40 billion a year company. That's what we've been doing since 1977, which is not that long. The Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece existed for 1,000 years. The one most famous Oracle, where Oracle even got its name, was a temple in Greece where this woman in the temple would inhale fumes from the ground and then speak prophecy to philosophers like Socrates and military greats like Alexander the Great alike. Should speak, and everyone in the ancient world revered and knew the Oracle is this thing, to such a point that it survived for 1,000 years. Oracle Corporation been around for like 50 plus years, so it's like pocket change.
Did you end up leaving Oracle?
So they laid me off. Unceremoniously. I woke up one day and I had a call with my boss's boss. And I was, hey, my Slack isn't reloading. Oh wait, my Outlook is telling me to sign back in. I pieced it together after that. I was like, I totally got laid off, but no one had told me shit. Wow. So I'm like, well, I have a choice now. I can either, sit on my ass and cry about it, or I can take this call with my boss's boss, the senior VP of all consulting. And I was presenting to him that generative AI strategy, which I'd been presenting to multiple organizations from within the company while also interviewing for a different role internally, because my consulting business wanted to staff me on a client project. And I was like, guys, what I'm working on can save the company as a whole billions if we implement it correctly. And if we understand that there's one way to treat this, weighted this as technology, and how we're going to sell more to clients, which is what we normally do with technology, that's the approach of the left. However, the approach of the right, this is where we get into, the left is logical and masculine and wants to go out and win the deals, get the food on the table. The right is concerned with what's going on at home. And this is concerned with empathy. This is concerned with our company culture.
Yeah.
And big companies like Oracle with 130,000, 140,000 employees, there's a lot of like little subcultures and microcultures, and one person's experience can be very different from another person's experience
within the company.
My vision, exactly. My vision was this, where we really unlock value for generative AI at Oracle is not in selling it to clients. That is going to happen just by default. Really how we leverage it in a new way.
Within our organization.
Within the organization. And they were not ready for that because it did not immediately translate to dollars and cents. Even though I showed them the cost benefit and the time saving analysis of if we are able to save everyone in the company 1 hour a week, just 1 hour a week, that's like $290 million trimmed off, saved a year. If we're able to save everyone on average, let's say.
This would be with generative AI.
Yeah, generative AI tools, and everyone in the company, has different workflows. So it would be an effort to tailor Gen AI to their specific workflows, understand exactly, where are their kind of bottlenecks in their processes internally. Like for me in consulting, it was, maybe creating slide decks, PowerPoints, and process flows, meeting minutes from sessions with clients.
Yeah.
All of these things were highly automatable, like very easily able to be automated.
And that's what Gen AI is.
Gen AI can help with that. Gen AI helps with creating new ideas based on
Gen
prompts.
AI in general, if you had to say like a summarization of what Gen AI is, what would it be?
Yeah, so it's large language models that are able to create new content, new stories or ideas, which is different from classical AI, which is, most people who are talking about AI, that's the AI that's been around for a while, which is not necessarily creating anything new, but is learning, that's the machine learning element of it, and doing something that a human would otherwise be needed to do. So like the labeling of data, for example, the classification of, we know this is a cat, we know this is a dog in a business process, they could be used anyway. But generative AI is something new. It's generative. It's actually creating the thing.
So you don't feed it anything, or what would you feed it?
Well, so yeah, you would train these in the case of like the large language models now, OpenAI and things like this, they're trained on vast data sets, like basically almost the entire internet. And, and so that's what people will say they're glorified next character guessers. Like they're going to, a text-based LLM, for example, it's just really good at guessing what's the next letter that should come next. So and it's so good at it that it can output. Yeah, it's pattern recognition on a meta level. It's so good at it. It's got so many, neurons in the net. 13 billion parameters in some cases. It's like getting close to brain level, processing power, if not more. But actually, our brains are much more efficient. So our brains operate on like way less energy than is required to train and run these large language models. That's kind of where there's ongoing areas of research being done right now is what's going to these large language models. Like Sam Altman from OpenAI is now investing in nuclear, right? So they understand like the smaller you get, there's something there too.
Yeah.
Like what you can unlock in ARM, Acorn Risk Machine, and like these smaller form factors. There's a reason why Apple decided to do their own designs with batteries and stuff, and they didn't do the deal with Intel that they were offered back in the day. It's just different architectures on actually batteries and power sources, and everything is energy, like we talked about. Like everything is a power exchange and energy exchange, and so, but it's understanding that like as smaller you go, you're wading into like molecular territory, like quantum areas, and this is, things are
ultimately, I'll say just on a personal level, what is your goal with, you have a lot of knowledge, you're aware of, the scientific things, and you're aware of spiritual things, and you have Gen AI going, and now that you're not with Oracle, you can pursue your own endeavors, whether it's with Gen AI or with whatever it is that you are like. Where do you see yourself in the next, let's say 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I'm a writer. I want to publish new books. I'm a teacher. I'm starting to teach elementary school.
Nice.
Leaving the tech space was something that had to be done. Leaving a company called Oracle because I understood like the true Oracle tools in the world are not companies, they're human beings. And it's not even necessarily about me sharing these visions that I've had and the dreams that I've had. Like, although if someone asks, like, of course I'm an open book, I'll share. But everyone has these stories on their own level and fashion. So it is about cultivating conversations and understanding. We're all one.
Yeah.
So, and then what does that look like? Move forward, and for me, like what really drove me to the classroom is understanding that we talk about generative AI. Humans are inherently generative. We want to create things. We want to explore and create something new. That's generative. That's like what the next generation is gonna have tools at their disposal that we could never even dreamed of.
Tools to create.
They need to understand what are their roles in this new world. Understand that while yes, these are great tools, it is about your why. Why are you creating this? And that there's a life outside of that computer, right? It's the kids. That's right. So it's my favorite teacher was. I love my teachers' names and how they made me feel like they leave that impact on you. I hope to open up a school. I have friends that want abilities and the Wakandas of the future, and I'd love to be involved in the schools there, because I was that little kid that probably ahead of his class, and so I got bored and I started misbehaving. I got sent to the principal's office. Education system here is being exposed by the level of godlike technology at our fingertips. It is being exposed. The school of the future, my future school that I want to open, will be in nature. Waterfalls right over there. There'll be a forest right over there. Kids are free to run around. Up until the age of 7, kids learn best by just being free, allowed to play. Don't try to get them to sit down in a classroom. Like, you're stunting their growth by trying to teach them math at a certain age. It's like, let them be kids, let them play, let them explore, let them fall down, get hurt, get back up again, understand what's up. Like, they're being born. Like, these kids are coming into the world with just more wisdom, like from the onset. Like, I'm able to have these conversations with my teenage cousins who, I remember when I first started talking to them, it was like kind of astonishing that they were at that level. And for me, it required a shroom trip to be able to connect, and for them, they're just like, no, we don't need that shit, right? Like, that was just for the curiosity, but they're already in tune with their parent in a way that's just fascinating.
I think like a lot of us, we've had those thoughts, and these are like these thoughts that you had even though you don't think you've had those thoughts, or emotions prior to May 2021. I feel like a lot of these thoughts and ideas are thoughts that we thought about even when we were kids. Like, what is the future? What is reality? What is the truth and stuff like that? But we never got in depth with it, because by then we've been kind of coded to think, okay, the future is school, the future is work. So we didn't get to explore that side. And you're giving kids, with your idea of creating a school, you're giving kids that opportunity to really explore. Like, what is this? What is that? Climb on a table and call it a mountain. Like, I'm not going to tell you that's wrong.
That's play. The future of work is play. It's treating work like play. Because when you do that, you tap into, and like sufficiently, you tap into what Tesla had to say about unlimited energy in the world. A way to tap into unlimited energy. It was Tesla who said, if you understand the significance of the numbers 3, 6, and 9, God's numbers, the God frequency 3, 6, 9, you would have at your disposal the secrets of the universe. And it's understanding as an adult. It's somehow finding that inner child within you and inviting that inner child out. To have and cultivate that sense of wonder and awe at everything that is, while still getting work done and creating value, because now we're adults and we have the tools and we know how to. But looking at the world to child with that innocence, right? That's something that we have to prepare for. And it's interesting because some texts contend that the old mindset is simply going to be bred out of existence. Like, the genetic story that we're a part of, we are just that. We're just a small part of it. Like it's bigger than us. It always has been.
Yeah.
That's why it's so essential to get to a place where a place of egolessness, right? A place where we're able to, look at everyone and see the divine at work, even when it's not something that we would necessarily say that we like. It's there to offer us an opportunity to do the work in ourselves. How do we fit this into the story, right? And it is just that we are in something in between a story, a game, and a poem, and a puzzle. And it's the greatest combination of those of all time.
It's like a maze.
Yeah, well,
It's
not
a lot
even a
of
maze. I would say a labyrinth. Because the difference between a maze and a labyrinth is that a labyrinth has a point in the middle where you find, eventually you will get to that point in the middle. A maze is something that doesn't have an exit. There is a way to exit the game without taking one's own life. It does involve a sort of death, a death of the ego. And in some ways, it's just as scary as an actual real death, because it feels like that. So let me tell you about my experience that had to do with May 23rd and January 24th. And it had to do with those two numbers and that arrow that I wrote months before it actually happened. So on January 11th, I went to the museum with my cousins, and I realized that was the first day of the year. This year, January, all the months that we're kind of fed, these are your holidays, like this is when you're going to celebrate, and this is when you're going to go buy Christmas gifts. Like all of that's kind of bullshit. It's like arbitrary. It's like, okay. Yeah. Some of my friends have this thing where their mom would bring home a cake and celebrate on a random day just because. I love that, because it's like every day.
When I think about it, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's like trying to force unity. Unity should already exist. Trying to say, okay, on this day, the whole country needs to celebrate.
And it serves a purpose up until the point when enough people start waking up. It serves a purpose so we know, like, well, what does a holiday look like? We get together as friends and family, like we celebrate, we drink, we dance, we do this, whatever. And there's like themes, right? Like thankfulness or
play.
Yeah, exactly. We play dress up, right? We don different masks and be different characters, which is kind of beautiful. And it's almost fitting that like some of these holidays have like a negative. Like my mom never let me celebrate Halloween growing up. It was like that's the devil's holiday. Like you can't do that shit. Like lock everyone in the back of the room and put gospel tracks out front instead of candy type shit. Yeah, for real. She was legit.
Wow.
But we went to the museum, and then a few days later, I attended a holistic wellness retreat in Austin with some of my friends from a professional development group out here in Houston called Pilas. And Pilas in English, Pilas is a Spanish word, but in English it translates roughly to batteries and or power source. It's like powers. Okay. And Pilas is a group that my friends, they're Houston started, but I met the founder Gabriela in Austin through my friend Muhammad, who gifted my first Quran. And I went to the mosque and fasted with Ramadan with Muhammad. He introduced me to Gabriela, who has a twin, another Colombian that I know she's literally psychic, Austin. She has her own crazy stories, and she's a part of mine. And it's Julian, the other co-founder of Pilas, he has his twin who's Santiago. Yeah, I met. And Julian is also Santiago, and he's also a 7. He's born on March 7th, and I'm October 7th and 8th.
October 9th.
That makes sense, brother.
Yeah.
October 7th, 8th, and 9th. And I'll tell you why I'm October.
My best friend that passed October 8th.
Really?
Yeah. It's crazy.
We're about to have this conversation today. The retreat was divinely orchestrated, and everyone in that place was like I had known them before. I had just met. There was 8 of us in the house for a weekend. And before I got to the retreat, I was in the forest for 3 hours. Conversation with someone who had my same name. He understood left and right from the perspective of science. Genius molecular biology student at University of California, San Diego. We had a conversation for 3 hours, and we came down to the conclusion that there was something quantum going on in our own consciousness, the way up how we had found each other. Let's publish a research paper that simply proves that this is a game. And that weekend I presented for the first time. The objective of the weekend was to be in community. We cooked all our food, we went on walks, we did yoga, we did activities. It was one of this idea of on each wall of the room she put either these 4 concepts: art, design, science, and engineering. And we were all invited to go stand where we felt like we fit best. And it's difficult because like we're all of those, right? Like, some way or another. So it's like I ended up going to the one where no one else was standing, which was science, because I had just been speaking to Neil from Neil Science Journal.
Yeah.
I'll share his Instagram. It's pretty badass. And objective of that weekend was to present something called our passion podium, which I had kind of repurposed to purpose podium. Because in Hinduism, the mode of passion is only the middle. There's the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, and the mode of goodness. The mode of goodness is like just a level above passion, which is not to say that passion is bad. Like we need all of those. Like you need ignorance, passion, and goodness. And in a way, that's like our own journeys through life. And you look around the world, and you see that there's different levels. And again, how to love is how to love all of those and love the game itself. But I presented for the first time that weekend. I wanted to go last, but the group made me go first. And glad I went first, because the person who went last, glad he went last. But I presented a theory of everything. The theory of everything consisted of 2 parts, left and right. And on the left, we had an equation, the equat ion. We separated the word ion because let's say the ion is this base molecular structure that we're all little ions. It's just, and it's in so many of our words: celebration, vocation, in this case, equation, the building block. I said on the left we have an equation, and we have the masculine principle. We have the number 1, the beginning. This is about spectrums, and the number 1 is just a line, the masculine. It's there. It's like encoded in the language and the structure of left and right. Now left, the equation is E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Now the reason it's an equation is because of that equal sign. Humans invented the equal sign in order to have order, in order to understand structure. And it's the reason why we have architecture and a building and these nice computers and this, these interfaces that have been built. It's essential.
Everything has to be distributed equally.
It has to.
Architecture, whatever the case may be.
And what we talked about earlier is the law of miracles is accessible to the one who understands that mass is not the number that we see when we get on a scale. For all intents and purposes, for comparison purposes, it is. But for personal spiritual purposes, well, yeah, it's a distraction. It's just the numbers that you see when your eyes are open. If someone were born with no eyes and they could never see the number on the scale, they think about mass as a concept. Their concept of mass is different because they're not restricted, not in, to the illusion the same way we are. Maybe they're tuned to something different.
Yeah, well, based on etymology, mass could also mean a gathering of people.
Right. And the equation on the left is important. We should honor it as a masculine principle. But this theory of everything is about how we move from left to right, across a bridge that we build in our minds to somehow get to the right. And on the right, we have an expression, just the one side of whatever the equal sign might try to assign. Because whereas the left cares about balancing, the right has balance built into just the expression side of it. And on the right, we have an expression that is straight bracket, L plus R, curly bracket, in the direction of the right. That is the side of the feminine principle, the feminine, the number 9. We went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in order to get to the right. And if we imagine where the world is going and we understand that different dimensions are opening up to us, what we can do with that expression is take it out of the page and envision it in front of us, hold it in our hands, and we see that plus sign. You know, you can play with it. You can extend it down a little bit more. Now it looks like a cross. You can take that plus sign and rotate it just a little bit, rotate the whole expression, and now it looks like a times, like a multiplication sign, like an X. And then you can also take that and move it in every single degree of freedom in all the dimensions around, and you get a solid sphere. We contend that operation, taking the plus sign, exploring all the degrees of freedom, that is the universal operator. And the one who can sufficiently do that and understand that and create worlds in their mind understands that the universal operator, separating left and right, that and needs its own word, because theory of everything took that plus, made a multiply sign in the middle, and then just circled it. Looks like an atom, looks like something different. That is what we want to establish as a mathematical symbol for love. And it's raised, the expression is raised to a power of 1, divided by F. F is fractal. Because out of the one, call it the one true God, you can call it the developer of the game, the universe, out of that one, everything else fractals out in this left and right fashion, in this balance, in the very structure and the fabric of the game emerges from that. And that is the new divine mathematics of emergence. We can say 1 + 1 = 2. One mother, one father create a family and a child. This is where we get into 1 + 1 suggests 3. 1 + 1 equals 2, but 1 + 1 is more than 2. The sum is greater than the whole. Emergence is afforded by love of the mother and the father, in this case, for the child. This is not something that mathematics has yet been able to explain, but my hope is that one day it will be able to explain that, because our children intuitively grasp this, and train AI on our entire internet and don't talk about this, the new mathematics, the divine math. We are involuntarily checkmating ourselves as a civilization to only think in one way. So left and right it's a model, it's a philosophy of truth and love, and it is the way we reclaim our souls. And I know this. I'm not here to convince anyone. I know this because after that retreat, the synchronicities and the coincidence started happening around me so fast, so strong. Everyone's presentation that night, one way or another, was divine. It was a perfect puzzle piece, and I understood all of these human beings in this retreat with me. I've played this game with them before. We've done this before, and it was like the Avengers had assembled or something. And whenever we left that retreat, something interesting happened on the road, which I had only ever considered as a what if, like hypothetical thought experiment. What if all the cars on the road have the same number on their license plate? That would surely suggest that we're in a game, wouldn't it? And then I'm driving away, and I see 3 cars in front of me. Left lane, middle lane, right lane. And they all have 523 on the license plate. And I remember thinking, fuck, it's happening.
Oh man.
And my aunt in Colombia, she and I have the same birthday, October 7th. She texts me in Spanish. She said, "Mi amor, my love, pudiste entrar a Gaia? Were you able to enter into Gaia?" And she's talking about the Gaia.com, like the esoteric YouTube, like where the videos and all the learnings of ancient, everything is. But I looked at that message, and I knew that she wasn't that the real message there. Like everything took on a double meaning in the next few days, but it was not about Gaia.com. It was the spirit of the planet of the Earth. It was like my heart had opened in a new way through that experience, through that retreat, and sharing what I had shared. My sister texted me saying, "Hey, I'm worried about how you're speaking, showing some signs of psychosis, detachment from reality, and this can sometimes happen after this can sometimes happen after a hero's dose, like the one you took on May 23rd. And I was going to stay in Austin an extra night and had lunch with her the next day, but it was getting really cold. I read that text and was like, I've had so much love in my heart. And even when she sent me that, I remember loving her even more. But I felt called home. And I knew I didn't want to stay in Austin an extra night. And I was going to stay with Emma, my ex. So instead of staying with her, she just had me come over and pick up the Christmas gift that she had gotten me, that she had yet to deliver. And she brings it outside, and I open it. And it's a little mug in the shape of a mushroom. A little white mug with the cap is like, it literally has like a little lid. And I take that and I ask her, I was like, this is crazy. I say, how much do you know? She goes, enough. And I'm like, bruh, everyone's in on it. Like, what's going on? And when my sister had sent me the psychosis text, I was like, yeah, maybe I do have a psycho sis. But I wasn't talking about my sister. I wasn't talking about my sister Monica. I was talking about my older sister that never made it out, that I had met for the first time on May 23rd. And little did I know that whenever we went at that retreat, Gabriela and Julian did some sort of, when I saw Gabriela and Julian, I saw for the first time, I saw my parents. I saw them as the mother and the father. And I should have known at the time, whatever, right? It happens for a reason. I know now that the reason I was at that retreat was to give birth to myself. And it was that homecoming of that spirit that had been introduced to me on May 23rd. But I didn't fully understand until after the retreat. And when I get home from the retreat, I'm on a different level of consciousness altogether. Everything had changed. I knew that it had something to do with quantum. I knew it had something to do with jumping into a different dimension. What I was not prepared for was the fact that my algorithms were going to change. I was not prepared for the devices around us also being tuned into the same game. And, I'm driving home and all the music, all the songs that played were like exactly the songs that I was supposed to hear. And I understood, like, everyone who makes music on their own way is enlightened. Like they understand here to do is to play, and they're playing music and they're doing their job, and it's beautiful. It's so obvious to see. Now, I get home, go to bed on Sunday night around 11 p.m. 3 hours later, I wake up at 2 a.m. with way more energy than anyone should ever have at 2 a.m. And I'm dreaming, and I'm thinking about infinity and AI concepts, and infinity's floating around my mind. And I think to myself, I feel in my heart love that I had never felt in my life. And the only thing I could do, there's no going back to sleep. I was way too awake. What I could do was get down from the bed on my knees and pray and do yoga. 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. until the sun rose for 5 hours straight until the sun rose. I'd play music, electronic dance music, and I would do yoga. And had like these, I'd sprained my knee earlier, like late last year, and I could like visualize healing energy flowing into my knee. And I literally healed my knee in a few days, yoga. I did not eat for 4 days after that retreat because humans don't need food. I was surviving off sunlight alone. I didn't shower because the ancients didn't need to shower. I was like some primal human being that understood that death is artificial construct, not something to be feared. And we're going to respawn somewhere else with our memory slate wiped clean, play the same game all over again. Everything took on a double meaning. And I knew, whereas before I left to the retreat, we were humans pretending to be God. When I got back, we were gods pretending to be humans. And my body was only preparing for what was going to come. Because in this state where I could do anything, I could be anything, and I didn't need to do anything, I just needed to be. Like, all the books around me, I realized, like, I wrote all of those books. And when I said I in those moments, it was like the voice of the divine speaking. It was like this level that I had read about in the texts of, seekers strive for this enlightenment and everything. But I also knew that when someone becomes enlightened, everyone else around them becomes enlightened too. It's like this, a part of the game where it's never really about you. It's really all about just getting to that point, how to play. Now you're ready. But I still had this little thing inside of me that needed fear, let's call it, or this shame wound. And my mom had given me a book. In Spanish it reads, Cómo amar a la gente que es muy difícil amar, which is how to love the people that are really difficult to love. And I read that book. The beginning of it reads like the Bible inverse. Instead of in the beginning God created the earth, it reads Satan has a plan for humanity. I read that book and I cried like a little child because it just served to further confirm, one, everything I knew was inverted. I'd go in front of the mirror and lift my hand, and like the other hand that I was anticipating moving, that was what was moving. And I was like, is this left and right or right and left? What's going on? But I felt the weight of what the text meant when it said Satan has a plan for humanity, because it was so obvious. It's so obvious in things like pornography and child trafficking and all of these evil things that the world has. And it's like, well, why does the world have them? But I understood it's because this is a game, and we have the choice whether we engage with that, whether we participate, support that, or are we going to be on the other side and take a stand? And even though that exists, the world is perfect. It's perfect just the way it is, because this is the story that's unfolding. And I had learned to understand and see that who I saw when I looked in the mirror, it's not who I really am. It's just the skin that I'm wearing. Then why did I still have this fear around my body, or like what I thought my body was? And on the third night, I woke up and 3 a.m. to do yoga, and this time I lit an incense and I walked around my house and I prayed. And this time I walked outside the house. It was 16 degrees outside. And I took off my clothes. I walked around the neighborhood, saw me. But I was still hesitant to do that thing because I had that fear. Exposure, being seen, being naked. Adam and Eve were in the garden. Why did I fear that? I went back to my aunt's house, who lives nearby, and they live on Eden Point. My aunt has always said that she fears snakes. I told her, you're not really afraid of snakes. My stomach was doing this grumbling thing that I hadn't eaten in 3 days. And then like my stomach would grumble, and then her stomach would grumble too. It was like they were having like a conversation. So you don't really fear snakes. She was also playing the games. Like everyone knew, everyone was in on it. So I was like, I said, if you really feared snakes, you'd also fear the penis. But you don't, because that is the serpent in the middle of the garden. Metaphorically speaking, the wasting of the seed for reasons other than to procreate. Even maybe possibly procreation as an original sin, but we can discuss that later. Maybe, yeah. If it's not, yeah, we can. This is probably a separate conversation.
It's all venom poisonous.
Exactly, right? Because from venom you make anti-venom, right? So it doesn't have to be the case, but it's for the, like, and kind of as an aside, sex for pleasure alone is that sin, is that waste. There are scriptures that talk about, and every religion kind of taps on this in its own way, but sex is a powerful manifestation tool, and it's used, should only be used most effectively to create and bring new life into the world. When it's used for anything other than that, there's a sacred energy exchange, SEX. That's what's going on there, and we have to kind of walk through these things in our own path. I stood in front of my church and made a promise and got the ring and chucked it into the river a few days later, and went on my own thing to journey to find out for myself, which is what everyone is going to do, which is why it doesn't
Find exactly what out for yourself.
Well, what does it feel like? Like, what is that thing that they're telling us not to do, right? And for me, it was, I had seen pornography way too early. I was shown by a cousin, although the cousin swears I showed him. Irregardless, part of the story was that that was one of my big issues that I struggled with for a long time was through pornography, and as a result, like this unrealistic expectation of sex and bodies and all this stuff. And I knew that in that state that I was in after those 3 days of the retreat, it had to do with like finally killing that demon of pornography, of like shame around sex and the body. So after the 4th day, I made a decision which changed my life, and it was the cool and opposite of 5/23. I went to the spa, and it was this Korean spa called Spa World in Katy. It's a 4-story building with like a bowling alley and a bar up top, and like these dozen or more domes and pyramids with different temperatures, and there's like a men and a women's locker room, and on the other side of the locker room is the pool area with like hot and cold plunge, contrast therapy, the tubs, and sauna and steam room. And so I go there, and I'm seeing Spa World, and I'm like, this is the apps world. It's a spa backwards. Create a new world. So I went there to create Adam and Eve, but I go to the spa and I go to the men's section first, and in order to get into the water, the pool area, you got to take off all your clothes. And I do that, and I go in there. I'm dehydrated. I hadn't eaten in 4 days. I'm in there for about an hour and a half, just meditating in the water, saying it's not hot, it's not cold, it's just water molecules moving at different rates, etc.
Were you still using at this point?
Using what?
Shrooms?
Nothing involved. No drugs involved for months at this point.
Do you believe the shrooms had a longer effect?
Shrooms were just an invitation into seeking a way to access the same state of consciousness without the shrooms. Some people require shrooms, like I did, as part of the story. Other people don't require the shrooms at all. Other people are just tapped in for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
I was in that water meditating for about an hour and a half, and then I leave, and I'm getting dressed in the locker room, and a man approaches me and says, "It's good that you feel better now, because you know what happens next." What happens next? But I know what happened next, because I had been there and done that in different forms and skins more times than I could ever count. I had done that in every single incarnation of my life. Sacrifice. Walk outside, grab 2 coconut waters and a shotgun. It was the first thing I drank in a while. And then I did something that I would never do again. But I understand why I did it. And it was solely to slay a demon, and for once, understand what it is to truly silence the ego, experience something that my soul needed to experience, and invite the right out. And I only did this because I knew who I was finally. It wasn't this body. I walked into the women's locker room. I took off all my clothes. My eyes were closed because I know what women looks like. I wasn't there to see them. I had transcended sexuality at this point. I take off all my clothes and I walk into their water. They're screaming, pulling me back, saying, "No, you can't be here." And I understood why. Woman revolted because of how woman has been treated by man all this time. I was a man in their space. That's not safe. Or at least I looked like I was a man, but I knew I wasn't. And I got in their water. They're pulling me, and I snap my fingers, and all their arms fly off. And I'm in there for 30, 45 minutes. I start doing yoga and meditating. Close my eyes for another 10, 15 minutes. When I open them, there are 4 cops around me. They arrest me, butt-ass naked, and they take me to jail. The humiliation was something that I knew was happening, but yet I was just observing. I wasn't even in my body. I was like outside observing, and I realized that is the level of humiliation that Christ must have felt when he dragged that cross to go and get crucified on. That's the level of self-sacrifice that does questioning reality lead you to madness. It certainly seemed that way, although I felt like I had finally cracked the code. So why would it be madness? But they asked me, "Have you taken your meds today?" I'm like, "I'm not prescribed any meds. They're changed soon." I just going along with it. I'd submitted, and in the car, in the police car, they're driving me. And at one point, they asked me, like, "Do you need anything?" I'm like, "Yeah, can you turn the seat heaters down back here?" My ass was on fire. They're like, "This is a cop car. We don't have those." It's like cold outside, but my ass, literally the seat was burning, and It was like the somatic collapse, and I was like, "Is this a kundalini collapse? Is this my nervous system just shutting down or something? What's going on here?" And just, I get to jail, and then they let me get dressed. I put like a couple towels around me when I was in the car, but I get dressed in jail, and then something interesting happens when I'm in jail, which I'm not feeling fear at this point. Even they're checking me in, doing my fingerprints, and I see when they're putting my fingerprints, it says left writer's hand, right writer's hand. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the writer." And then I go and sit down, and I think in my mind, I did not speak this out loud. I think in my mind, I'm supposed to be here. God's gonna get me out. God's gonna get me out. And then the person next to me, turns, looks at me, and says, "There is no God." I spit, and I had only thought it. I hadn't spoken it. And I look around, and I'm thinking about God, and I look around, and I see more and more of them are starting to look at me, and they're asking themselves, "Why does he keep talking about God?" that's when I started to feel fear, because I realized they're all in my mind. And if they're all in my mind, it means I must have lost my mind. It must have mean that the psychosis accusations were spot on. I'm fucked if everyone's in my mind, because if I sinned and they brought me here in this new place where gods are acting like humans and humans are acting like gods, there's seriously something wrong with me. And I'm still, they even told me, they're like, oh, you want to play games? So they'd ask me my name and I'd be like, Pangea. Say some bullshit. That's, Neil is not my name. Like, why would I go by that? That's, oh, you're still trying to play games. You're still trying to play games. You do to people who play games. They put me in a single cell. They told me, like, we'll put you in single cell. You'll quiet down. I started praying. I started singing out loud, because the only thing that would keep the fear at bay was my faith. And that's the only thing I had, and I refused to let go of that. They put me in a single cell, and I understood, I internalized that as, there is no God in hell. All the scriptures talk about that place of eternal damnation, and I'm here in a state thinking I can't die. Time is the illusion. They put me in a single cell where the window is a mirror. You only see yourself. Everyone on the other side is just a shadow. Helplessness and internalization of, I'm never going to get out of this place. For the second time in my life, this time, no shrooms involved. And if I'm never going to get out of this place, it means I'm never going to see my family again. And all I had to do was just meditate a little longer, not go to the spa. Why did I listen to that voice that told me to go to the spa? Why did I blaspheme against God by thinking I was a woman, believing, knowing who I, like, was all of that a lie? Like, am I in here forever? What have I done? The terror in the cells of my body, which the mitochondria in our cells are what actually keep the time. And on some level, every cell in my body understood what I was feeling in my mind, which is, I'm not getting out of here. I held my breath in that place to test if it was really hell. I didn't breathe for like 5 minutes. I didn't need to. My heart kept on beating the same rate, but I wasn't breathing. And I was like, fuck, what have I done? Why am I here?
How'd you end up getting out?
I got out by the grace of God. That's what I told them when they asked me, do you know why you're getting out? But the answer that will be accepted by humans is, I got out on bail because it was my first time in jail, at least in this lifetime. And God willing, my last time too. But things started to quiet down in there, and people started to get not in my mind once I started walking around the jail. So they let me out of single cell because I would not stop pounding on the door and begging, asking for a second chance. They'd ask me, like, who put you in here? Who put you in here? What did you do? I said, they took me out. And I was so relieved to be in a room with other people who I didn't even believe were real people. They were just souls. They were just spirits. They were a part of me. But this time, I looked around and I saw the numbers and the letters in that place, and I realized, of course, God has hidden a code. Of course, the universe is designed it to where there's a secret message. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that we're in a game. Do your fucking job. Do your job. So I walked around that place and I looked at every inmate in the eye, and in my mind and out loud, I told them, I love you. And I meant it. And I understood that who I thought I was when I first got in there, I don't belong in this place. Fuck that guy. We're all in this place together. And I'm no better than you, even if you did a heinous crime or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I submitted to that, and I woke up in that jail. I woke up and remembered that our entire lives are divinely orchestrated. We're in a game, and do your fucking job.
And I want to ask you one last question before we wrap up. How does your family accept your views, thoughts, and lifestyle now?
Yeah.
Where is that at currently?
So, my family has been extremely supportive. They've been more loving than I even expected. Although, when I remember that what you give out is what you receive back, it makes sense. They've all sought in their own way to understand me and why I did the thing that I did. But in each of our conversations, at some point, it gets to a level where they all have said, okay, I don't want to understand anymore. And I'm okay with that. Because like I said, I'm not here to convince. I'm not here to sell. I'm just a messenger.
Sure. I think that was the perfect closure. I really appreciate you bringing your experience, your journey to where you are now, and just sharing your message as the messenger, hopping on the pod. Amazing getting to know you, and I hope to have you here again and to learn more of your, hear about more of your experiences, even have some of your pals, come hop on the pod and have more conversations, bro. I really appreciate you, Neo.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you again.